Good evening and welcome. Tonight we're going to be going over the history and geography of Ivory Coast. Now, Ivory Coast is its English name. It goes by the name Côte d'Ivoire, which is its French name. It also means Ivory Coast in French, en français. Ivory Coast is a French-speaking country. I live in America, and its American name is Ivory Coast, so that's how I'm going to be referring to it in this video, but Côte d'Ivoire is also acceptable. To start off with its name, Ivory Coast, I've got Topple the elephant here to help demonstrate. But this region of West Africa along the Gulf of Guinea and Atlantic Ocean had these nicknames. You can see Grain Coast is right over here because Liberia had a, I forget what it's called, Malagueta pepper, I just remembered, which was a very prosperous grain. Then we have Ivory Coast, which the name stuck. I think it's like one of the very few places in Africa that kept the colonizer name, but Ivory Coast obviously imported ivory, which comes from elephant tusks. Over here by Ghana you can see the Gold Coast because Ghana was very rich in gold. And then you can't see over here, but the region by Benin, Togo, Nigeria is the Slave Coast because we just covered Benin, which is right here. Just off the shot here. There was a tribe there that greatly profited off of raiding villages of their enemies and selling them as slaves. So that's how it got that nickname. So Ivory Coast comes from the name that I believe the French would have given them because of their very large ivory trade. But let's talk about its geography next. For the most part, Ivory Coast is very hilly and very forested, and as you can see there are a lot of rivers all throughout it, also along its borders as well, but there are three big rivers that flow right through Ivory Coast just like this. Let me get my pencil up here so I can show them to you. They are the Sassandra, which, see if I can find the top of it. It flows through here. You can see it's dammed right here, creating this big lake. There's also the Bandama River, which is the longest river. It flows through here. And it's also dammed in quite a few places. The dam over here forms Lake Kousou, which is the largest lake in Ivory Coast. And then there's the Komoe River, which flows right through Komoe National Park over here and goes to the coast. So three rivers just coming right through it right there. More in the northern region, it's a lot hotter and drier because it's approaching the Sahel region, the southern part of the Sahara Desert, where it's not too deserty, but it's still pretty hot and dry. So as you can imagine, it's much cooler down here by the coast, and most of the major cities are in this area. The biggest being right here. This is Abidjan, and it's kind of like the capital of sorts. It's the economic capital, right? It functions exactly like a capital would, except it doesn't have the government there, if that makes sense. The government would be in the official capital of Yamoussoukro. And we'll talk about why in its history, how this city came to be. It's a very interesting story. And then after that, I'll get out my tablet and show you some pictures of Yamoussoukro. There's not a lot of street view or really cool spots to show you on Google Earth, but I'll show you some of Yamoussoukro because it's really bizarre looking. I won't spoil it for you. Well, I'll give you one little hint. It has the world's largest church. And you think, well, obviously Vatican City has the world's largest church. No, it's in Yamoussoukro, Ivory Coast. I'll show it to you. The main mountainous region, there's quite a few, but the biggest would be over here in the Nimba Mountains. Mount Nimba sits right here on the border with Guinea and Liberia. The countries that border Ivory Coast are Liberia and Guinea, Mali up here, Burkina Faso, and Ghana. And of course the Gulf of Guinea down here in the Atlantic Ocean. The coastal region, like I said, it's very the equator's not far away, so it is pretty tropical. Very hot at times, and along the coast grow mangrove trees, which really prevents any kind of sailing interaction. There's also no natural harbors on the coast here, so it wasn't really a place that seafarers came to explore. The earliest people who would have lived in the Ivory Coast are not really known about. They didn't leave much behind. The humidity doesn't help with archaeological remains, and the forests were very thick, so there wasn't a lot of, at least that we know of, societies going on there. But there were people here. They would have first made outside contact with Berber traders coming from the north of Africa. The Berbers would have brought Islam also to the area because, the Islamic peoples of Africa and Asia were super about trading and bringing their religion with them and just spreading Islam everywhere. So that happened here. The first major outside migration would have come from the Songhai Empire as it was falling. That would be just north up here in Mali. The fallout from the Songhai Empire, the people who moved further south to get away from it would have eventually established the Kong Empire, which would eventually be conquered by the Wassoulou Empire in 1895. I'm getting a little ahead of myself. Also on this area of the country would be lots of different Akan groups. They would have fled from the Ashanti tribe over here in Ghana. If you've seen my Ghana video, you would know why. The Ashanti were pretty ruthless, pretty merciless, very, very tough kingdom. The Portuguese explored and mapped the coast in 1482, but they didn't really do much with it. Like I said, there's the mangrove swamps and there's no natural ports. There are so many other little interesting harbors and bays in this area that this area was just kind of left as is. The first real European presence would have been in this city of Assini. In 1687, the French built a mission here. Along the coast here in Ghana, many different countries, mostly the French and British, were building castles and fortifications and things like that. So it started to spread over to here, and the French started really trying to gobble up this area of Africa, mostly to spite the British, but also to, create economic interests. There was a big expedition in 1843 to explore the area and to make contact with any tribes and have them sign treaties so that the French would officially be in control. And those treaties all came together to form a French protectorate, which was officially established in 1915. In the meantime, before then, once the French started to gobble up this area, they created huge plantations, the biggest one being cocoa, which Ivory Coast is still the world's #1 exporter of cocoa, which becomes chocolate. There were also coffee plantations, palm oil, and of course ivory, being at the start of the French plantation era. Ivory would have been the most major export. This area was full of elephants, and they got nearly wiped out during this trade. The government has since done a lot to protect the elephants. The national parks here, you see, are little elephant havens, kind of trying to undo what was done in the past. In the late 19th century, the French had all but gobbled up this area. It's kind of a weird term I'm using, but that's really the best way to describe it. They just sank their claws into the area and took it over. The last big resistance would have been from Samori Touré. He was the leader of the Wassoulou Empire, which was really coming into prominence in the very late 1800s, which the French were not about. They eventually captured him in 1898, which basically ended any kind of major resistance against the French. The people, however, were not happy with French rule. There was a lot of forced labor on the plantations. The French instituted a head tax. And also when World War I came around, a lot of Ivorians were conscripted to fight the war, which these people had absolutely nothing to do with whatsoever. So that was pretty bitter. But during World War II, the country stayed loyal to France. So not Vichy France, not the Nazi-controlled France, but France, right? So to thank them for that, in 1946, France granted all the Ivorians French citizenship, which, I mean, gives them more rights, but it's like, wow, thanks, for that. They slowly started to give Ivory Coast a lot more rights politically, especially with the rise of Félix Houphouët-Boigny. He had created the first agricultural trade union in Ivory Coast. He was eventually elected to French Parliament, and once independence was granted on August 7th, 1960, he became the first president. And once the country achieved independence, their economy exploded because they really went in on the cocoa thing. Like I said, they're still the #1 exporter of cocoa. So this was the era when that industry just took off, and they made buckets of money. They were the most economically prosperous country in Western Africa at the time. However, the government was a one-party state. Félix Houphouët-Boigny, for all the good he did, he was kind of like a fanatic. He really wanted his country to be very European, and not modern European, but like 1800s European, the big castles with gardens, and it's hard to describe. I'll show you in the pictures, but his hometown was Yamoussoukro, which around this time was population 500. It was just a tiny little like mud huts and what have you. So he decided this was going to be a glorious European style capital. So he helped to construct the world's largest church. He built these huge government buildings which look like Marie Antoinette would be quaking seeing these buildings. They're super lush with these huge gardens, and yeah, it's not at all in place with what Ivory Coast was like at the time. And as you can imagine, these building projects sucked up a lot of money out of the government, even though it was very prosperous. I mean, yeah, you understand. There was a big recession in the 1980s also. The country started to fall into debt, and there were many protests for a more democratic government. However, Houphouët-Boigny passed away in 1993. His successor was named Henri Konan Didier. He basically tried to continue what Houphouët-Boigny was doing. But a coup in 1999 placed a man named Robert Guailly in power. But there was an election slated for 2000, which was planned to go on as planned. The most popular candidate was named Alassane Ouattara, which Robert Guailly and his government made an amendment to the constitution, specifically so that Ouattara couldn't become president. Ouattara is part Burkinabe, and he's actually a descendant of the leader of the Kong Empire, which I mentioned way long ago. It's really interesting. But they changed the constitution, saying that the president could not have any other nationality. They had to be 100% Ivorian, which people were really upset about. A man named Laurent Gbagbo wound up winning the election, which people were also not happy about because he was more on like the tyrant side of leadership. The whole election mess wound up leading eventually to the 2002 Civil War, which stretched on for a long time. It was really bloody and really awful. The French government came in to help, and they basically wound up doing the opposite of that. They just literally made the situation 10 times worse. I won't get into details because it's pretty awful, but yeah, that's all you pretty much need to know about that. A peace deal was eventually signed with the rebels in 2007, but, you know, another election's around the corner. Like, basically, they just agreed to peace, but it didn't fix any of the election issues, right? So, in 2010, Ouattara won the election. Like, he was that popular that people voted for him, even though, like, he couldn't be president. So, Gbagbo claimed that he was the winner and ignored the election results. That led to the 2011 Second Ivorian Civil War, which thankfully did not last long because Gbagbo was eventually arrested by the UN and the French peacekeeping forces. And Alassane Ouattara was installed as president, which he still is today. He just was elected for his third term in 2020. And that's basically where Ivory Coast is today. They definitely took a big hit in the last few decades economically, but, you know, they're not doing that bad considering the world as it is. So let me go get my tablet and I'll show you some cool Google Earth shots of some places in Ivory Coast. All right, here we are at Côte d'Ivoire. Let me zoom out a bit so you can see just where we are in Africa as a whole, basically. So we are right here. And let's check out the country. Let's look at a little slideshow. So this church, right? I said before a couple times this is the world's largest church, right? So I recorded the part you just watched like 2 days ago, right? I went to bed and laid there going, there's no way this is the world's largest church. I mean, this is the church, right? So the next day I Googled what is the world's largest church, and St. Peter's Basilica popped up. So I was like, what the heck? But then, like, every source I read about this says this is the world's largest church. And even Pope John Paul II named this the world's largest church. So it's not so much like the church apparently sits, what was it, like 17,000? St. Peter's Basilica sits like 30,000. It's the actual grounds of the church itself that's really big. Let's see. Oh, how pretty. That's nice. Très belle mosquée. Okay, so this is Abidjan. I would show you some street views, but they're literally all street views. Like, see this highway? Like, that's all you see. So this is what the city proper of Abidjan looks like. It's very metropolitan and busy. Cool buildings like that. Ooh, that's neat. Little animals. See, a busy, busy, busy city, right? Big skyscrapers, everything. Here's the church again. Pretty waterfall. Inside the church, I'll show you some. So, anyway, like I was saying, the world's largest church, right? So basically, if you include the grounds, it is the world's largest like church complex, but this is the actual church itself. You can see very inspired by St. Peter's Basilica, the shape of it. But it is a very massive complex. It's a school. And, oh, that's nice. Okay, so first, let me show you Abidjan. Oop. All right, so here's Abidjan. So yes, big major city. That area I showed you with all the skyscrapers was Plateau right here. Yeah, they've got this big long coastline. Not a lot of big like resorts in the terms of like we think of beach resorts. But there are places nonetheless. Grand Bassam is like the nice suburb of the city. And Yeah, this is the most populated area. There's the International Airport. The most populated area of Ivory Coast. So let me zoom out a bit and I will show you Yamoussoukro. Go like this. And that's up there. Yamoussoukro. So, like I said, how Felix Houphouët-Boigny wanted to make this like a very like 1800s, 1700s European city. So this is the whole city. There are some major city developments. It is, the capital of the country. But you can even see from this high up the projects that were started and never finished. Like this whole neighborhood. So as you can see, very like European structures. We have this big park area with this huge building of some kind. There's not a lot of Google information. So this is the church, right? The Basilica of Our Lady of Peace. And like basically it is in the middle of nowhere, because you can see all of this land was set aside to become things, and there's straight up nothing there. The date's not popping up, but these pictures are from like May 2021. So, plans were made, but the government just ran out of money. So let me show you this complex that was built. One of the things that managed to get built. The Basilica of Our Lady of Peace. Okay. Google Earth like crashed. I finally got it working again. My goodness. Okay, I've never had that happen before. So here is the actual like chapel, basilica, I suppose. And standing in this huge courtyard. Super expansive, big blue sky. And as you can see, this land is pretty flattened. There's basically like nothing as far as the eye can see, just the road leading up to this. It's a very empty place. It's very interesting though. Let's go inside this neat little area here. So if we go right here, so here's the actual doors to the church itself. And then we stand under these huge pillars, this big outdoor area. It's just so excessively large for a place where there's just not a lot of people. It is very beautiful though, you gotta hand it to them. This is absolutely gorgeous. But a part of me is like, this is what they did with government money. Build this huge church complex. So if we count like all of the space associated with it, it becomes the world's largest church. Technically, look at these pretty grounds. But yeah, it's so interesting. Like there's a couple homes like you can see over here. Like this is not African style home architecture. Like it's not about like having your own yard. Like yards aren't really a thing in African homes. Let's see if we can find a better example. Let's just go like in here. Like these are how African homes are laid out. Like there's a bunch of little homes and then there'll be like a center area where like everyone lives together and they have one shared space. Like having like a yard is not really how African homes are built. It's just not in the culture, but I mean they did try, didn't they? To make it look very, very European. And there's just these random spots where projects started and nothing happened. Here's some more Western style homes. Here's a stadium that it looks like the parking lot was never finished. It looks like they're kind of working on it though. Looks like there's some cranes or something going on there. Big high school. So yeah, it's a very, oops, I dropped a pin. Very interesting little place where, and like, look, just randomly, like, I wish it would tell me what this building is. This is such a bizarre, neat little city, but it's kind of sad too that it didn't turn out to be Felix Houphouët-Boigny's dream. There's another one. What is this? Maybe like a hotel or something? There's no 3D view here. It's all flat, so I don't know. Very, very interesting. And then, let's see. I can find the airport. I think it's this way. Let's just zoom out until we see it. Oh, the president's residence, which kind of rhymes, is under these trees. You can't see it. I wonder if... Yeah. That's the president's house. It looks kind of like an office building. Like I guess it's meant to be like the White House, you know, like the home and workplace of the president. Oh, look at that neat neighborhood. Let's see. See, it looks kind of New York almost. Like there's the park in the middle. Very interesting. There's the airport. So like, here's the big airport, right? And there's just nothing in between the airport and the city. What's that? Some homes. Looks like a little village outside. So it's like, did they intend for all of this to be like fancy homes and stuff? I guess we'll never really know. But like, you can see from up here how high this is. Just how much they planned and never got done. It's so interesting to me, but oh well, maybe someday. The rest of Ivory Coast pretty much just looks like this. Very green and lush and beautiful. And, you know, there's national parks where it's even more green and lush and beautiful, but not a lot of places to show you. Like I said, there's really like no street view. Except in Abidjan where it's the literal like highways. So there's the Thai National Park. Let's see if there's any cool pictures. Oh, so pretty. Oh, how cute. Oh, how beautiful. Oh. What a fun park to go to and explore. Wow. So yeah, Ivory Coast is a beautiful place. It's very lush and wonderful and just very, very interesting. Let's turn it back the right way. There we go. So that's about all I want to show you on the tablet for tonight. Tomorrow I'll read you a nice long book about Ivory Coast so you can learn a lot more about the country and the people and what have you. Pretty much everything else I didn't cover tonight. So, thank you so much for watching. I hope you found this video relaxing and educational. And I hope